Okay, so this is the video for section 2 of chapter 2, the coming of independence. We must all hang together, or assuredly we shall hang separately. This is spoken by Benjamin Franklin on July 4th, 1776. That quote's not going to be on any test or quiz, but I think it's a pretty fantastic quote, very motivating, very whimsical almost. So Britain's colonial policies. 13 colonies separately established and separately controlled by the king and his council. Remember, Parliament took little part in colonial management. They were too busy worrying about their own constituents, their own people that elected them. They were not concerned about the colonies at that time. And due to the distance, colonists became used to a large measure of governmental independence. Relationships by mid-1700s between the crown and the colonies had become federal in nature. They also had a uniform system of money and trade. Okay, so the federal part is the different layers. You have the king and his council, you have parliament, you have the governors of each colony, you have the advisors that go to the governor, the legislatures, etc. There are different levels to the government. Okay? And the uniform of money and trade, they all use the same amount, the type of trade, the same type of units of money. Okay, and this scenario at this time is completely in line with Romans 13 verses 1 through 4, which is almost rare to find. Okay, so it's something to be valued. But after the French Revolution, the French and Indian War, Britain faced a large amount of debt. King George III saw the colonies as an opportunity to pay down those debts. Income tax, the Stamp Act, the Sugar Act of 1764, and many more. Okay. The king wanted to use the colonies almost as his cash cow to pay off the debt that he incurred by fighting the French over the Ohio Valley. Okay. Furthermore, colonists saw themselves as loyal subjects, but believed that Parliament and the Crown should stay out of their day-to-day business, meaning, hey, trust us to take care of ourselves. We've been doing it already. We've got this. We'll keep doing the trade. We'll keep having the same unit of money, but do not be controlling our every move and every business transaction. Also, after a couple of years, the colonists were faced with a choice: submit or revolt. Which one was it going to be? Were you going to fight against the tyranny that had taken over? Or are you going to submit and keep paying the outlandish taxes and following the rules and quartering of troops, etc.? Okay. Now, after this choice was kind of promoted, growing colonial unity began to take place. Okay. The colonies had to work together in order to succeed. It couldn't be New York versus Great Britain. It couldn't be South Carolina versus Great Britain. It couldn't be Virginia versus Great Britain. It had to be all 13. It was all or nothing. Okay? And so there was a lot of propaganda that was used by the founding fathers. Benjamin Franklin drew a bunch of different cartoons and sketches to try to get the colonists to join together and fight against their imperialist power. There were some early attempts at colonial unity before we began getting it together. New England colonies actually formed a confederation to defend themselves against Native American attacks, which is pretty cool. Then in 1696, William Penn offered an intercolonial co-op that received little to no attention. Then in came the Albany Plan. Franklin proposed the formation of an annual Congress of delegates from each colony. And this legislative body could do the following: raise a military, make war and peace with the Native Americans, of course, regulate trade, taxes, and customs. Now, the Albany Plan was also very much influenced by the Great Law of Peace, which was signed by the Iroquois nations. They too were a confederacy at that time, and Benjamin Franklin sat in on quite a few of their meetings and was inspired by their sense of unity, and they could do a lot of these things were outlined in their Great Law of Peace, and Benjamin Franklin kind of copied it to a certain point. And of course, this plan was ahead of its time. The colonists weren't ready to be that unified. They didn't have that cause just yet. Pity. Now, the Stamp Act Congress. Okay? The Stamp Act Congress, or First Congress of the American Colonies, was a meeting held between October 7th and the 25th of 1765 in New York City, consisting of representatives from some of the British colonies in North America. It was the first gathering of elected representatives from several of the American colonies to devise a unified protest against new British taxation. Parliament had passed the Stamp Act, which required the use of specially stamped paper for virtually all business in the colonies. So they were controlling the day-to-day. All the commerce had to come to a grinding halt in order to fulfill this Stamp Act. Okay, and this eventually led to the famous Boston Tea Party that was orchestrated by Samuel Adams and his compadres. Okay, now the link below, if you choose to go to it, is a kind of a cute little history topic clip on the Boston Tea Party. We didn't go into it in class, but that option is there if you want to see it kind of come to life, if you will. Now, the First Continental Congress, the spring of 1774, Parliament passed more laws to punish the Bostonians for their Boston Tea Party. It was also known as the Intolerable Acts. Okay, Congress, the Continental Congress, sent a Declaration of Rights. Okay, not the Declaration of Independence, but the Declaration of Rights, protesting Britain's colonial policies. And then finally, the delegates, wanted colonies to boycott trade with Great Britain until the laws were rescinded. So they wanted to unify on that front of like, hey, they passed these intolerable acts, these acts that were just ridiculous. We're not going to trade with them until they rescind the laws. Let's hold out on them as far as exporting and importing. Let's just stop. Let's halt all trade. Then you have the Second Continental Congress, met May 10th, 1775. The revolution had begun 3 weeks prior to that, Each of the 13 colonies sent delegates or also known as representatives to the Congress. John Hancock was chosen as president of Congress. They created the Continental Army along with, fees, how much money they could pay them per day, etc. And they appointed George Washington as commander-in-chief. Now, this Second Continental Congress became the nation's first national government. In this Congress lasted from July 1776 to March 1781 until the passage of the Articles of Confederation. So it lasted for a little while. And then we had to switch over to the Articles of Confederation, which we will talk about in the next section video. Now, the Declaration of Independence. Yay. Congress named a committee of 5, not 1, but 5, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Mr. Sherman, Mr. Livingston, and Thomas Jefferson, to make a statement of independence. They brainstormed. It wasn't Thomas Jefferson by himself coming up with all these ideas. He had help, But once they have these brainstorming ideas written down or jotted down or noted, they looked at each other and said, who's the best writer? And TJ, or Thomas Jefferson, got the call, He wrote the majority of the document. Now, before it was put up for adoption on July 4th, Benjamin Franklin actually proofread it. And he went through it and looked at it and gave feedback, and they've changed it a couple of times before it actually became adopted on July 4th, 1776. So it's important to remember that while we adopted on the 4th and they signed it on the 4th, the King of England did not receive it until weeks later because it had to travel across the Atlantic via boat. So we celebrate a different time. I'm sure they celebrate their frontmen at another time. This concludes our section 2. In a moment, if you switch over to section 3, we'll finish with the Articles of Confederation.